A millionaire hears twin sisters begging to borrow bread and does the impossible. What if a chance encounter in a grocery store could turn not only the lives of those you help, but your own as well? This is a story about how kindness isn't always loud, and about a man who found a home where he never searched. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which part of the world you're watching from today. The cashier's voice was harsh but tired, not angry, just distant. 2 9-year-old girls stood at the counter, gripping a loaf of bread. They were like mirror images, same worn jackets, chapped noses, grown-up weariness in their eyes. Yet in their voices, there was no pleading or tantrum, just a desperate attempt to speak calmly. "We'll bring the money, honestly. It's just that Mom is very sick." The cashier looked away. He had heard that every winter. Silence fell over the store, and then, to his own surprise, a tall, reserved man in a spotless dark coat stepped forward. He had simply been standing by the mineral water. He didn't know why he had stepped in. He was just passing by. "How much is the bread?" he asked. The cashier started, and then the man placed a big bill on the counter, without saying anything more. "That's a lot," one girl whispered. "That's okay. Take something else. Maybe kefir." They took it, not because they understood, but because he looked at them not as an adult, or someone pitying them, but simply as someone present and nearby. This man was named Dylan Carter. He was in his early 30s, owned hotel chains, an investment firm, and 2 luxury cars, one so expensive it had been stolen twice in a year. That day, for the first time in years, he did something not out of logic or calculation, but simply because he couldn't walk past them. Half an hour later, he stood by the panoramic window of his penthouse. Everything was as always, clean, stylish, impeccably dead. The newspapers on the coffee table were filled with headlines about yet another deal. In the kitchen, a coffee machine better than any barista. In the hallway, security guards he barely knew by name. And in his mind echoed, "Can we pay later? Mom is very sick." He didn't know why he couldn't forget. He didn't know why he remembered those words. He spoke. "Helen," calling his assistant, "find out who these girls are. I want to know where they live quietly." "All right, Mr. Carter. I'll look into it." He hung up. For the first time in a long while, something stirred inside him, not pain or pity, but a forgotten warmth. Meanwhile, the girls walked home, one carrying kefir, the other the bread. Their steps were soft but swift. The building smelled of burnt food and soap. They climbed to the 5th floor and opened the door with a key into an apartment where only one room was lit. "We bought everything," they whispered, and there was a man. On the sofa, their mother barely opened her eyes. Her forehead glistened with fever. The girls sat beside her in silence. They knew she couldn't eat, but needed to be near her. "He had kind eyes," one breathed. At the other end of the city, the man with those eyes stared from his window, feeling no cold, just strange anxiety and resolve. He didn't yet know this meeting would change his life, but something in him already sensed it. Dylan reread their file with internal resistance. The paper facts didn't speak of what he'd seen the night before. The girls' restrained voices, how one held the bread, as if it were a treasure. He looked out the glass window of his penthouse, higher than most buildings. There were no street smells, no children's voices. Everything was muffled behind glass and silence. Then he realized, he couldn't stay. He couldn't just know and sit there. He left the house alone, no driver, no car. He walked first along manicured sidewalks, then along unfamiliar streets with peeling facades and graffiti. Henderson Street welcomed him with dreariness. The stairwell smelled damp, and someone was drying children's clothes there. He didn't know why he came, but he knew he wouldn't leave just yet. In the courtyard, the girls really were twins. The night before they had seemed children, now they looked almost grown. They were gathering aluminum cans in a bag, working silently, efficiently. He approached without making himself obvious. "What are you doing this for?" he asked. They started, then one stepped forward bravely. "We're recycling, for medicine." Mama got worse. He nodded. I can drive you and buy anything you need. They looked at him warily, but not in fear, just with deep fatigue. You have kind eyes, said the second girl. Like a password that opened a door. They rode together. The pharmacy, the supermarket, warm tea at a small corner cafe. They ate sparingly, almost like they were afraid to show how long it had been since they last ate properly. He didn't ask many questions. He just listened as they told their story. They lived in cramped quarters, they said. When their mother fell ill, they hid it, from their neighbors, then from school, then from themselves. They said they could do everything. Cook, wash, even steal clothes in the night. Sometimes their mom would call to someone who didn't come back, and that was what scared them most. When they reached their doorstep, he helped carry their groceries. A thin, sharp-eyed woman in a worn but clean robe confronted them. Who are you? She asked him pointedly. Just a passerby who couldn't walk away. Rich people don't help the poor. They play saviors, she said, her voice edged with pain. He said nothing. He understood. Her anger was fear, uncertainty, a mother's need to protect her children. He placed the bags by the door, pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket, and said, If you need anything, I'm at the Breeze Hotel. Dylan Carter. Then he left, without waiting for a reply. Later that night, he was once again sitting in his apartment. He hadn't turned on the lights. On his phone was a video sent by a business partner from Singapore about an upcoming deal, millions, ambition, but all he could see in his mind was a different image, a girl in a patched-up jacket saying, You have kind eyes. He looked around his apartment again and suddenly realized there wasn't a single spot in the place that brought him any joy. Everything was there, but none of it meant anything. He didn't know what he would do next, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just forget. He came back the next day, and the day after, without any phone calls, without any plans, and without security. The guards downstairs began to recognize him. One of them even asked, Did you lose someone here? No, he replied without a hint of a smile. I think I found someone. He saw the girls again, at the pharmacy, at the recycling depot, carrying bags. He saw one cut her hand trying to pull a can out of the trash, and the other quietly bandage her hand with a tissue, saying nothing. Sometimes they noticed him, sometimes they didn't, but they never ran away, as if his presence had become a part of this new reality, not an intrusion, but something that resembled stability. Why are you doing all this? Sarah once asked. Because you didn't ask me to, he answered. That's silly. I know, he nodded. But I still do it. One evening, he finally knocked on their door again. He stood there for a while, unsure if they would open. They did. Rachel appeared. She looked tired, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was steady. We have everything we need. Thank you for the groceries and the medicine. But please, don't come back. I don't want to interfere. But you are. We have to learn to handle things on our own. And what if you can't? Then we'll at least have our dignity. He nodded and left again, but this time not empty-handed. He left with an understanding. She wasn't asking, she was fighting, even if with her last ounce of strength. That night, he sent a short message. Helen, find out if Rachel Winter can be hired somewhere. Something light. At Breeze. Let her think it's just a regular opening. The answer came 10 minutes later. We'll do it. Quietly. No extra details. Meanwhile, the girls kept going, day by day doing what they could. One day, he saw Olivia standing in front of a bookstore window, looking at fairy tales. She didn't ask. She just looked. The next day, a paper bag appeared at their door. For reading only. From no one. From somewhere. By the fourth week, Dylan felt something strange for the first time. A sensation in his chest. Not pain, but life. He stopped watching the market. Cancelled a meeting in Zurich. Told his assistant. I want to stay in the city. For a while. Until I figure out what's next. One night, He stood at the window of his apartment. In the distance, the streets glowed, streets he now knew. Henderson Street, Building 15. A place where words carried weight and actions mattered. Then he remembered something his mother told him when he was young. The hardest part isn't staying human when things are hard. It's staying human when things get easier. He hadn't understood then. Now he was beginning to. The next day, he came again. No gift. Just to be there. "Mom's asleep," Sarah said. "But she's doing better. Would you like to wait?" "Can I?" "You can." They sat together in the small kitchen. The kettle boiled. The girls debated the proper way to add honey, before or after the tea. "Were you ever a child?" Olivia asked. "Yes. A long time ago." "And who was there for you back then?" He went quiet. There was no answer. No one. And in that moment they seemed to understand him more than any adult had in his entire life. That night, before bed, one of the girls whispered to the other, "Do you think he really stayed?" "I think he did. He doesn't have that look on his face anymore." And somewhere else in the city, a man who once had everything thought for the first time, "I'm not climbing anymore. I'm heading somewhere meaningful." He didn't yet know that soon there would come a night when he'd have to run, not for money, not out of obligation, but for those who had become closer to him than anyone in 30 years. That night, Rachel's fever spiked again. She groaned in her sleep, clutching her chest, breathing heavily. The girls took turns placing a damp cloth on her forehead, trying to lower the fever with the last of their medicine. "She's not waking up," Olivia whispered. "This isn't just a fever anymore," Sarah added, her voice trembling with childlike fear for the first time in a long while. "We can't do this alone." They didn't cry. They didn't scream. Sarah opened the window and breathed in the icy air. "Remember what he said? That we could find him." "Yes." "Then I'm going." "In that." "It doesn't matter." Sarah put her coat over her pajamas, sneakers on her bare feet, grabbed the scrap of paper with the hotel address, and ran into the night. The city at this hour was different. Quiet. Cruel from the wind. Headlights cut through the darkness. Cars hissed over wet pavement. She ran, barely recognizing the streets. Turn after turn, past the bus stop they once used, toward a sign with the hotel's logo. Gold letters. Adults passed by and no one stopped her. Finally, the entrance. Huge glass doors. In the lobby, the guard was about to speak, but then he saw her eyes, the same eyes Dylan had seen in the grocery store. The same ones now staring at him across the reception desk. "I need him." The man with the kind eyes. 2 staff members took her to the 5th floor. Within 10 minutes, a car was racing through the night. Dylan held the girl's hand. She was shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. "You did the right thing," he said. "The very right thing." "I didn't know who else to trust," she whispered. "Only you." When they arrived at the apartment, Rachel was unconscious. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing shallow. Dylan, without wasting a second, called the chief physician of the clinic he had contracted with the year before. In 15 minutes, the ambulance was there. He rode with them, and stayed. The clinic admitted her without any paperwork. The staff saw her name and nodded silently. He didn't say who he was. He only said, "Do everything you can. But above all, do it fast." The girls waited in the reception area. Dylan sat beside them. He got hot chocolate from the vending machine. Then more. Then bought them Snickers bars, which they didn't ask for, but still took. An hour passed. Then another. "Will you stay?" Olivia asked. Even if they asked him to leave, he said simply, "I'll stay," until they said she was stable. In the morning, the doctor came out, exhaling heavily. Severe inflammation. Her temperature was over 40. "But you made it in time, just a little later, and we might not have saved her." He looked at the girls. "You did well. You saved your mother by your actions." Sarah held Dylan's hand tightly, not like a child, but like someone who had realized that while everything might depend on you, Sometimes someone can appear and help without asking for anything in return. He spent the next 2 days with them. The girls stayed temporarily in one of the hotel rooms. Not a luxury suite, but it had a bathroom, hot water, and a TV they never turned on. They preferred to listen to him read. He read them fairy tales, not about princes and castles, but about heroes who simply never give up. He brought books, learned to play board games. Once, awkwardly but laughing, he tried to make pancakes. They didn't turn out great, said Olivia. But we ate them anyway, added Sarah, because now we know they weren't made by a chef's hands, but by a person. He smiled for the first time in many days, truly smiled. A week later, the doctor said, "She's regaining consciousness. In a couple of days, she'll be able to talk." He didn't know how she'd react, whether she'd push him away again, but now, it didn't matter. He hadn't come for gratitude. He simply could no longer stay away. That evening, when the girls had fallen asleep, he sat in the clinic hallway, drinking cheap coffee, staring out the window. Dawn was breaking, and in its light, there was something that felt like a beginning. He pulled out his phone and wrote to Helen. "I think I understand now why all of this. It wasn't about business. Not numbers. It was about this feeling, being needed." There was no reply. But he hadn't expected one. He looked at the city where he had lived for 30 years, and for the first time, he didn't feel alone. Rachel came out of her room on the third day, weak, in a hospital gown, her hair tied messily in a bun. She saw him immediately. He was sitting in the hallway with 2 blankets, one on his lap and the other covering Sarah, who had dozed off beside him. "You're still here?" she asked, not as a question but in surprise. He nodded. "I stayed. Someone had to. But you have your own life, your own affairs." "I'm not so sure anymore." She sat down beside him, exhausted. "I don't like feeling indebted. I'm not asking for thanks. Or trust." "Then what?" He was silent for a moment. "So that one day you might believe that help isn't pity. It's just being there when there's nowhere else to turn." She was discharged 2 days later. He came to pick them up, not in a chauffeured car, but in a regular, slightly dusty taxi. Because he didn't want it to be a gesture. Just a ride home. She was silent during the ride. The girls chattered in the back seat as if the hard days had never happened. Then came a moment that changed everything. Sarah laid her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "He stayed, Mom." Rachel didn't answer, but she looked in the rearview mirror, and her eyes were different. A week later, he knocked on their door again. "Sorry to bother you again," he began. "I wanted to offer you a job. I can't right now. I need to recover. I understand. I'm not rushing you, just when you're ready." "What kind of job?" "Front desk administrator. One of the floors at Breeze. No heavy lifting, flexible hours, benefits." "Because you pity me?" "Because you've earned a chance. Not for the past, but for how you live now." She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't want to just survive. I want to live with dignity. That's exactly what this offer is about." She came for an interview 2 weeks later. No one at the hotel knew it was by the owner's request. Everything went as usual: application, brief training, uniform, shift. She worked quietly, reliably, with no special treatment. He didn't interfere, just occasionally came to the lobby, watching from a distance how she talked to guests, how she made notes in the logbook, how the girls ran through the hallways, carefully, almost in whispers, so they wouldn't disturb anyone. Once a week, he visited their home, not with gifts but just himself. He read to them, played with them. Once, he fixed the faucet. Another time, he brought a lamp. "Aren't you afraid that one day we'll disappear, and everything you did will be in vain?" Rachel asked him once. If even one day with you was real, then it wasn't in vain. Weeks passed. Then months. He became part of their lives. Not the center, not a benefactor, not a guest. Just part of it. He even had his own cup in their kitchen, with a crooked label written in marker. "The man with kind eyes." And then, one day, he returned to his penthouse. It was late evening. The city outside glowed as usual, but inside, everything was just as silent. He walked through the rooms, stopped at the panoramic window, looked down. "I built everything," he said out loud. "Except one thing, a home." Knocking. Echo. Emptiness. He opened the closet. Inside were suits he no longer wore. Shelves stacked with watches that no longer had meaning. He thought of the girl in pajamas running through the city at night. Of Rachel, weak but still pushing him away to stay independent. Of the kettle whistling in their tiny kitchen as they ate pancakes together for the first time. This penthouse had everything except life. He realized, returning isn't about a place. It's about people. From then on, he became simply Dylan. Not Mr. Carter. Not the investor. Not the owner. He was the one who stayed. Sometimes in the evening, they would sit by the heater, looking out the window. The girls would argue over which star was theirs. And he would sit quietly and listen. Because for the first time in 30 years, he didn't need to be heard. He was simply accepted. And he knew he was home.